Hey everyone, it's Stove here, and I am recording this a little bit late, so hopefully I could get this out later today. It's around 9 o'clock in the morning that I'm recording this. Last night I was going to, but just felt very tired, and as you can tell, a little bit weird throat thing going on with me. Pause. But anyway, yesterday I obviously recorded the review for the NFL Week 5. Today I'm going to be recording, obviously, Week 6 of the College Football League. And yeah, let's get right into it. Last week you had Sam Houston, New Mexico State facing each other. New Mexico State really putting a solid win at home. So props to them. Same with BYU, who's ranked 23rd as of now. South Florida actually dropping outside of the ranks. I swear, just because of their conferences, they're just gonna. I don't think they're gonna really break top 20, just because of the people that they face. Even if their offenses do look dominant during the next 5 or 6 weeks. Anyway, so you got New Mexico and San Jose State, which a lot of these guys were able to win at home besides Delaware on Friday. And we get into really the big stories of Saturday. OSU putting a very big hurting on Minnesota at home, so good for them. Miami still doing what they needed to do to be able to win. I'm surprised they're not ranked number 2, just because them facing a state rival in Florida State at Florida State is hard enough, and with it being that close of a game by 6 points, it was a very solid game by both teams, because I think some of the fans thought really Florida State could have won this game if it went a little bit different with penalties, or if Florida State did probably a couple more things on offense and made the plays that they need to. But unfortunately they didn't, or they couldn't, because Miami's defense was just a little too strong for them. Oklahoma blew out Kent State at Oklahoma. No surprise there. Texas A&M did pretty well against a conference rival in Mississippi State, so solid win there at home. And speaking of solid win, actually a very upsetting win, somehow, someway, the UCLA team, who was going on to being one of the worst teams in college football history, ends up winning against Penn State, which I'm actually surprised Penn State does not drop further down the list outside of the top 10. But, I guess you do so much already. Penn State has already lost to Oregon, so solid game anyway in overtime, but then loses the next game against a conference team, the lowest conference team in the conference. So, and especially since they lost the way they did, they didn't exactly look like Penn State, like the Penn State that we knew that they can be. But unfortunately, that's just, the way the cookie crumbles for Penn State. But that just also shows anything could really happen whenever it comes to college. Anything can really happen in the NFL. You just really don't know until the results are in, and whether it's an upset, whether it's a blowout. A lot of people weren't thinking that UCLA was going to put up much of a fight, even at home, because they had already lost big at home anyway. But solid game for UCLA, and an unfortunate event for Penn State, them already having 2 losses, and hell, even dropping down in the conference because of them being 0-2 in the conference now, I believe. If unless they're like, I think there might be just 1-2 actually. But anyway, you got Texas and Florida, which was our first game that we talked about during the preview of this weekend. Solid game by both of them, and obviously I did say that Texas, besides Ohio State, you take Ohio State out of the schedule, Florida was going to be their first, but now they obviously were their second team that they had to deal with, like truly deal with. These other teams that they faced were supposed to win. Now, even though Archie Manning still had his struggles against these guys, you still saw some Manning magic that was able to be put out there for the world to see. Unfortunately, though, we did not see that, and actually we saw more great quarterback football by DJ Lagway. So I'm glad that the 4 or 5 interceptions he threw in one game against a pretty solid defense, I believe, against one of the other Florida teams, as long as he's able to just see where the mistakes were, forget about it, and move on and get further and further into this year, Florida can still end up being a top 25 team, especially if they're beating a team like Texas, because their defense is solid. The fact that they were able to score more than 20 points is pretty. Florida looks like they've been pretty good. However, Texas also has a strain at that quarterback position. They were only able to score 3 touchdowns, which is good still, but against a team like Florida, or against a team like, if they can't beat Florida, then they can't necessarily beat really a lot of teams in the top 10. And that's just my take on it. Whether that's a hot take, whether that's just a take in general, I think if Archie Manning continues to play like this and he doesn't fix things that he should or improve the things that he should, and it's the middle of the season now, or it's past the middle of the season, so well, at least for the regular season, the guy needs to fix what he needs to fix. Simple as that. And I think you continue to work with him on that. I'm sure he'll be an incredible quarterback. The guy is technically a junior this year, so even if everyone's saying like, oh, Archie Manning could go into this draft this year, he could. But at the same time, if he feels like he needs more development to work on himself as a quarterback and as a person, to work on all of the mental games that goes on during the football game itself, then that's what he should do. He should stay one more year with Texas and see what he can do, see what knowledge he can gain, whether that's creating different plays in different ways, many more different ways, or it's really just all up here for Archie Manning. And facing someone like Florida, their defense is pretty solid. Their offense, not so much. So that's why I am kind of surprised that Florida was able to score 29 points, but their field goal kicker is also pretty solid too. So being able to probably get 29 points, I'm sure the kicker had quite a bit to do with that too. So, like I said, I knew Florida was going to be a challenge for them. I did expect Texas to win, but unfortunately they didn't, so I was obviously wrong on that. Now, what I wasn't wrong on was Alabama winning. I was kind of expecting more of a shootout, which the first half was exactly what looked like could be a good shootout, or at least a solid game, even if it wasn't back and forth, but they were long drives, they were continuous drives. However, in that second half, especially that fourth quarter, but in the second half, Alabama was able to come out the gate. They were able to control what Vanderbilt had, especially with Vandy having so much speed on that offense. Granted, obviously they have weapons on there, but whenever it's literally just Cedric Alexander and Pavera doing all the work, the heavy lifting, it's kind of hard to be able to beat somebody like Alabama. But obviously it could have went the other way. Alabama's defense played phenomenal in that second half, and that's exactly what they needed to do. They needed to prevent Vandy from sniffing that red zone. They needed to make sure that they were able to stop the speed of that offense. They were able to slow down that offense, then they had that chance to be able to go 3 and out, and then have Ty Simpson and that offense go through and be able to get whatever touchdowns, whatever field goal positioning they could. Obviously, they went 30-14, so obviously, again, the kicker had quite a bit to do with that. At least 3 kicks, at least 3 field goals from what I imagine right there. So, realistically, it was probably like, it could have been like 21-14 if they never made those kicks, or didn't make those kicks, but still, Ty Simpson had a phenomenal game, 340 passing yards, and I believe he also had 2 touchdowns as well. So props to him of getting the ball down the field, being that playmaker for Alabama once more. I think, like I said, I think he is a candidate for the top 5 in the Heisman conversation, for sure. Now, the only thing is, even though they beat Vandy, they were able to beat Georgia. That's why I felt like Alabama was going to squeak this out. It was probably a closer game than a lot of people realized. So, realistically, I think you still give Vandy a chance of still trying to make the college playoffs. And whether they do or not, it really just depends on if they are able to win the next like 5 games that they have. And those 5 to 6 games that they have, Alabama, the same thing. They could possibly lose the next 5 to 6 games that they have on their schedule, because both of these teams have the SEC to worry about, the rest of them. And both schedules just have quite a few ranked teams that are unbelievably good. Texas A&M being one of them, which I think Texas A&M has the ability to wipe their slate clean with having maybe getting an undefeated season. But obviously, if Alabama is able to beat them, or if Vandy is able to go undefeated the rest of this year, it may just look like SEC is like going to be more of the dominant conference as they usually are. But again, it's really up in the air, because even the ACC has some solid teams that are up there and have had some solid wins. The Big 12, speaking on that, you had Texas Tech and Houston, which was another team that we talked about. I figured that Texas Tech was going to end up winning. If you guys want to check out my last video, I'm pretty sure I did say that it was going to end up like the Utah game. Now, obviously, the Utah game could have been close, but it wasn't. Texas Tech, with all that money that they put in these players, Texas Tech is playing the way they need to. And that's making sure that their defense handles business. And obviously, if Houston or Utah or teams like Iowa State, who obviously lost against Cincinnati at Cincinnati, so props to Cincinnati, by the way. But you got Texas Tech still looking like a dominant force in the Big 12. There's more than likely not going to be much argument whenever we get more and more into the regular season for Texas Tech, especially since they're also going to have to face a lot of these top Big 12 teams to actually see if, all this money and all this domination against Big 12 teams already, is this true? Because they're still undefeated in the Big 12. They're still undefeated overall, and we're gonna see these tests being made like in late regular season for a lot of these different teams. So props for Alabama winning. Props for Vandy for still trying to stay in the game, but obviously once Alabama's defense got going, it was kind of too late there, especially with, by the way, over 9 minutes on their last drive, I believe, from what I understand. So they wanted that. They wanted to drive that ball down the field and chew as much clock as possible. And the fact that they were able to do that gave Vandy's defense a very tired possession. Very tired drive. But at the same time, Alabama was able to keep that offense off the field, because that was really one of the only ways that they were able to really stop Vandy completely. But anyway, Texas Tech did pretty much the same thing. I think Texas Tech was slightly more dominant. Their quarterback still playing with almost absolute passing completion. Well, not absolute passing completion, but absolute passing game. Ty Simpson and him, the only difference was the 5 passing yards, but still both did pretty damn well. So I have to tip my hat to both teams, tip my hat to Vandy. Houston, obviously they were undefeated going into it. I think they'll still end up being like top 6 in the Big 12, but they'll still end up losing at least 2 more games this season. Maybe more, but we'll just have to see on that one. Obviously, Georgia beating Kentucky. It was actually a closer game than I thought. I generally thought Georgia was going to put the belt to Kentucky, being maybe like 49-14 or something like that. Maybe score a couple other touchdowns, but they did what they needed to do to get the win. Iowa State and Cincinnati, obviously that was not one of my games, but if it was, man oh man, would have talked about this game a lot, probably. But like I said, Cincinnati was able to get that win at home, and it's now shaking up the Big 12 with Iowa State basically down 1 game with teams like Texas Tech, I think Arizona. It's one of the Arizonas that are also up there, and TCU I think is up there. And you got those teams that can make a huge impact. So, and even teams that are right now at the bottom, they can still be brought back up. They could still make amazing games. Well, play amazing games and be able to reach those final couple of games and make it the end all be all for either their team or teams behind them or in front of them. But anyway, so solid game for both teams. I don't think it's really down and out for Iowa State. I think the pressure on Iowa State, the way they've been playing all this year, it just shows if you have a team that's continuously wanting that win, because in my opinion, I don't think Iowa State played teams that had never given up before. Cincinnati showed that they weren't going to give up, especially trying to win at home. So like I said, big old switch, huge shakeup in the Big 12. I almost said Pac-12, but the Big 12 is looking for a new leader. I think that's Texas Tech, easily. Michigan versus Wisconsin, solid game there. Wisconsin still showing that they're like trying to do something, but Michigan just beating them because they're like still technically the big brother to some of these Big Ten teams. Notre Dame doing their thing against Boise State. Purdue trying to score quite a bit of points, which they did, but Illinois was able to score even more points. So solid win away for Illinois. Virginia actually wins in overtime against Louisville, which I believe I had Virginia winning this game. I was not expecting it to go to overtime, but at the same time, I'm glad that it ended up actually going towards the kickers. Both quarterbacks, I think, had solid games. Obviously, Miller Moss with 329 yards. I believe Chris Bell with 170 of those receiving yards. So solid game by Virginia, but also very solid game for Louisville, like staying on there. And look out for both of those teams in the SEC, because they could end up creating some upsets for some teams, especially since Virginia not only just upsetted a Florida State team, but they then went in and beat technically you could say that they upsetted Louisville at their house, but I don't think it was really an upset. But still, solid game there. Boston College and Pitt obviously doing what they needed to do. Clemson beating North Carolina at North Carolina. Wasn't much of a surprising thing there, just because North Carolina. Sorry about that, guys. If you guys heard that, that was definitely, and it's still going on. Wow, something bad must have really happened there. Prayers to them. But North Carolina is still not really doing anything. And obviously, the more and more I see this, the more and more I'm just going to be like, if you guys want to watch North Carolina, you guys can. If you guys don't want to, I get it. This team is not going to look like the team that I'm thinking that they can be until next year. Until they get some recruits or they get some transfers or something like that, because I think they have quite a few seniors graduating anyway, and even some juniors and sophomores that are playing right now that can do some good next year once they kind of got their fill of whether it's losses, whether it's experience, or it's both. They're going to be kind of sick and tired of all the stuff going on this year, and they'll probably just be working on every game this year to get better. And so hopefully next year, at least they can do something. Not to say that they're only focusing on next year, they're focusing on game to game time, but still losing to Clemson when Clemson is also not doing that good, at least not coming up with these wins like they should have, but yet they're winning against basically weak teams that haven't really found themselves yet. It's kind of, embarrassing for Clemson, but North Carolina, it's like still embarrassing that they lose at home just like that. Actually, I think whether it was this past weekend or it was last weekend, but you saw fans just walking out of the stadium by the third quarter or something, second or third quarter. Anyway, Kansas State and Baylor. I believe this is another Big 12 matchup. Baylor actually beating Kansas State. shaking up the place even more by 1 point. Wow, that was extremely good. Robinson putting up 345 passing yards. So you guys might want to also watch out for this Baylor team. They could do more than just shake up the conference. They could possibly make it to where they're in the top 3 just the way they've been playing. But at the same time, I think their defense needs a lot more work and not just allowing 30-plus points a game. Obviously, they've had some solid defensive games and haven't allowed that much for the majority of their games. But still, it shouldn't be looking like that between 20 to 30 points per game pretty much for Baylor's defense. That's probably the only thing I would say that they need to work on, but other than that, their offense seems to be working a lot better and being able to do what they need to do to score when in the red zone. So I think their red zone percentage is actually pretty high from what I imagine. Anyway, so you got Air Force and Navy. Pretty solid game there. Rivalry, obviously military rivalry. Navy wins against Air Force. Army wins against UAB. Ball State wins against Ohio. Wake Forest wins against Virginia Tech. And North Carolina State beats the crap out of Campbell. That's like a AA Division I team there, I believe. Arizona beats the crap out of Oklahoma State. You guys remember how Oklahoma State was like top 16 or top 12 at one point in the last 5 to 6 years? Yeah, I kind of missed that, but at the same time, I'm very glad that one out of 2 of my Arizona teams, seeing an Arizona team winning is exactly what I want to see, because I think Arizona, the state itself, is very underrated, and the college teams are very underrated in their own, because I think they have a lot of determination, just like some of these Ohio teams that can just come out of the woodwork. But yeah, Washington and Maryland, which I also had as one of my 7. I had Washington winning against Maryland, which did happening, but a very close game as well. So, like I said, Big 12 matchups, Big 10 matchups, a lot of these games, if you want to focus on just one conference, I get it. If you just want to focus on one team or 2 specific teams, I get it, because there's a lot of games going on. But, if you ever have time, check out these highlights, because they're really not important. Well, they can be important, especially if you're looking at who did these guys play to get to this position, that they're the top 4 in their conference now somehow, and the way everything happened, they're oh shoot, okay, they played some solid teams, but they also played some not so good teams. But I think everyone should also just realize, whether it's division, whether it's conference, I think you're going to have tough games in those. Just like the same thing with the NFL. The Browns are the Browns, or lately the Ravens have been the Ravens, or Tennessee Titans have been the Tennessee Titans. But they're division rivals. For some reason, they just have more of that spunk and that hatred that fuels them to be able to really want to try to get those bragging rights, saying, oh, even though we're the worst team, we still beat the top team in our division twice this year and faced them twice. But anyway, so that's why I feel like that's really important to me anyway. But yeah, so Northwestern doing their thing at home. Same with App State having a close game against Oregon State. SMU beating Syracuse. Even though SMU is at home, I do think that's kind of an upset against Syracuse just a tad bit. UConn doing their thing at home, that's good to see. And a lot of more like smaller games until we get to like Nebraska, who was able to just outscore Michigan State. It was pretty much back and forth, but they were still able to beat a conference team, an in-conference team, so that puts them still like in the middle of the group of the Big Ten. And I believe, okay, so you got Colorado and TCU, which TCU beat Colorado, no surprise there. Kansas and UCF. Kansas actually upsets UCF at home, even though I think Kansas is actually doing pretty well this year as well. Memphis dominating at home as well. California versus Duke, which was my last game that I talked about last week. I did have Duke winning, which California, it didn't seem like they had too many answers on defense against Duke. And Duke has just been playing, like, they've played pretty well. Like, they were 3-2 going into it. California was 4-1. But at the same time, Duke has just looked better against these conference teams for some reason. Now, once they face teams like Clemson and these like ranked teams that are in the ACC, it would be a little bit different, and we're going to see a little bit more actual competition for Duke. Not saying that California or the other teams that they beat in their conference already wasn't competition enough. I just think whenever Duke is doing this to their conference teams, then it maybe should be looked at like, oh, is Duke also someone to look at, not just as a basketball team anymore, but also a somewhat solid football program too. And that's the same thing with Kansas. So anyway, I believe that does it for this video. Obviously, I did a quick rundown. If you guys want to look more into this, obviously go to ESPN, look at the stats. But yeah, hopefully once I get this finished and uploaded, edited, and all that good stuff, I should be doing a recording for NFL Week 6, a preview for that, and hopefully I can talk about some like main things that can end up in more upsets going into this weekend for the NFL, and also maybe some interesting games possibly going into overtime once more, because we've been having, like, this has been one of the more exciting seasons ever since COVID, really. I feel like this has been one of the more surprising and exciting seasons that we've had. So anyway, don't want to ramble on too much longer. You guys have a good day. Please please subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for the views, by the way, of the UFC, the shortened version of my UFC 320 live reaction. Obviously, first time doing that, as it said in the description, but appreciate the love, you guys. And yeah, you guys have a fantastic day. And like I said, let me know what you think of these videos and what you feel like I could do better, or just, share your thoughts just a tad bit. Anyway, I'll see you guys around. Peace.